My name is Patrick George. I am the Veteran Service Officer for the City of Watertown. And as we prepare and lead into our 2025 Memorial Day Parade, we are joined today by our guest, Colonel J.D. Williams. Colonel J.D. Williams was an active duty Marine from 1978 to 2004. He served as an intelligence officer with the 1st and 3rd Marine Divisions and the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. During his career, he participated in Operations Desert Storm, Fiery Vigil in the Philippines, El Dorado Canyon against Libya, and he also deployed in Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Upon his retirement from the Marine Corps, he served as a senior executive in the U.S. intelligence community, working in the U.S. Treasury Department, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the National Intelligence Council. After leaving government service in 2017, he was a senior defense researcher at the RAND Corporation. He moved to Watertown in 2023 with his wife Eileen and daughter Caitlin, and their son lives in Cambridge. Colonel Williams, thank you so much for joining us with a biography as impressive as that is. I just wanted to ask briefly and lead into this as we prepare for Memorial Day. What led you to join the military in the first place?
So I actually joined in '74 with an ROTC scholarship. That was not a popular time to join the military coming out of Vietnam War. Lots of kind of reasons. My parents were first responders. My father was a policeman. My mother was a nurse. So I think there was always an element of public service in the family background, but no military. So I didn't have any kind of legacy to follow. Um, I was always interested in history and particularly military history, so that was a draw. And then there were some practical considerations, like it's a adventure way to get out of the Midwest and see parts of the world, and having a scholarship that enabled me to go to a pretty good university was also a factor. So as with many young men and women, it's there's a number of things that factor into it. But I also kind of had a feeling that with the sentiment of the Vietnam War, and it was on the periphery of it, as in high school. But there was still a feeling that military service was important, and even though it wasn't popular, somebody still needed to do it. And when the opportunity presented itself, I thought it would be something I wanted at least to try.
Great. And so, in your military career, as long as long as it was, can you speak to how important it was, or what was impressed upon you by your units in the military, and why Memorial Day was so important, and why it was so significant when you were active duty?
So I think the military as a whole, does a very good job of passing down its legacies and its traditions. But if I can be prejudiced about it or biased, I think of all the services, it's the Marine Corps that really drills into you that legacy. So I served as a recruit officer at boot camp for a couple of years, and that was everybody thinks boot camp is about basically creating robots, and that isn't it at all. It's about instilling in individuals a sense of camaraderie and loyalty and commitment to an ideal and an organization. And at that at Marine recruit training, you really get that sense of understanding the importance of what has gone before and the sacrifices that go across the generations of Marines, back to the Continental Marines, and then World War One, Belleau Wood, and then all the battles across the Pacific, in World War Two, and Korea and the Chosin Reservoir, and then into Vietnam, which was about the time when I was there in the '80s, was the legacies that we've had. But since then, certainly have picked up on the more recent battles that Marines have fought, and the heroes that have come out of that.
Absolutely. As we were talking about preparing for this interview, I was reminded of a Marine I went to MOS school with, who my MOS was aviation specific, information technology specific, not in a front serving combat role or any of that. Uh, And a Marine that I was in MOS school did not take kindly to that, and always saw the commercials, and knew as a Marine he wanted to be infantry, and found a way to go MARSOC, which is the Marine Corps Special Operations Command. Unfortunately, he was killed in action back in 2011, but his reputation precedes him. He's, historically speaking, the PT field that the MOS school I went to was just rededicated to him last summer. There were Marines that knew him from his MOS school. There were Marines that knew him as a MARSOC Raider that were there to honor him along with his family, and that goes to the history and the importance of that. Are there any particular moments in your career that you can think of that sort of draw back to that, that esprit de corps that we hear about in boot camp and OCS, and, sort of how
Mhm.
a Marine that lived that, or, another service member that lived that you worked with?
Well, a good friend of mine, we went through college ROTC together. In fact, he's probably more responsible for me going into the Marine Corps than anybody else. Him and his dad kind of recruited me out of the Navy into the Marine Corps while we were in ROTC. Um, he and the battalion he served in, his battalion sergeant major was Sergeant Major John Canley, and Cantley was a hero from the Vietnam War. He was a central figure in the Battle of Hue, and he was awarded a Silver Star for his performance there, um, which is the third highest combat award. You have the Medal of Honor. You've got for the Navy Marines, it's the Navy Cross, and then you've got the Silver Star. But the awards process in Vietnam was kind of haphazard. A lot depended on your unit and your CO, and there was a definite difference in the way the First Marine Division and the Third Marine Division handled awards. Um, for what Cantley did, his award was clearly undervalued, and Cantley made such a strong impression on the Marines in both in his unit in Vietnam and subsequent units that they eventually, made a campaign and were successful in actually getting his award upgraded to the Medal of
Wow.
Honor.
Wow.
And that was awarded, I think, in 2022. And subsequently, a Navy ship has been named for him,
Wow.
as generally, ships are not named for living members, but for Medal of Honor recipients, there can be an exception. So there's a expeditionary support base that's named for Cantley, and my friend kind of was in the center of this, helping with the to get the award upgraded, and then part of the ship naming and commissioning. But if you go back and you read like Mark Bowden's book about the Battle of Hue and kind of the total, it was really a very, very unsettled situation, and the units were committed piecemeal. It was not a stunning exhibition of military expertise on the part of the larger commands and the Marine commands, but the individual heroism of the Marines stood out, and Cantley was one of those guys, and fortunately, before he passed away, he was able to finally get his due, and was actually the only, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was the only um, African American living that Medal of Honor recipient, because he was still alive when he got his medal,
Wow.
and he was posthumous, not posthumous.
Yep.
Um,
I think that speaks to the commitment, right? Of
right.
a
I think
conflict, and
and from my career, I was kind of, some would say lucky. I think for a Marine, you won't consider lucky if you never get to go to combat. But I was too young for Vietnam,
yep.
and I was too old, frankly, when you got to Afghanistan and Iraq. So I was really never shot at. I mean, there were some, mortars that came in when I was in Afghanistan and Iraq, but I was only there briefly. I wasn't, assigned for a full combat tour. But unfortunately, There were a number of Marines and service people killed in units I was in, and it was a reminder that serving your country in the military is a dangerous business. You deal with military aircraft are inherently dangerous. And as much as you want to make it safe, if you're going to be prepared to do the job that needs to be done, you've got to fly in a way that is not has inherent risks involved in it.
Yep.
So on the Marine Expeditionary Unit I was on, there were two helicopter crashes, both Navy helicopters. In one case, the tail rotor came off, and fortunately, the pilot was able to put the aircraft down in the water, and all the crew got out safely. In another case, don't really know what happened, but the aircraft went off the back of the ship, and the entire crew was killed.
Wow.
Um, the first training exercise I went on, or one of the first ones, a tank rolled over, and the crew commander was half out of the hatch, and got rolled over and killed that way. So there's, I think, we think about wartime and, big wars and big casualties, but, peacetime, even in peacetime, it's a dangerous business. And the servicemen and women that are out there, are, I'm not going to say they're risking their lives every day, but there's an awful lot of activity that goes on that is necessary to prepare and be ready, that have inherent risks in them.
Absolutely. You train for war, and as you're training for war, sometimes these inherent risks do certainly come up. So as you've explained in your military career, obviously the significance of Memorial Day has led into that. As you transitioned out of the military and sort of moved home, moved to wherever you lived after you ended the military service, can you speak to what Memorial Day was in your community, and what was what you enjoyed and what was carried over from when you were a civilian?
Right. So, I after I retired, I was in Washington D.C., and being in the intelligence business, that's kind of prime territory. So, we actually settled in a suburb in Northern Virginia. Falls Church was the name of it, and for that community. And so, first of all, you're going to get caught up in, or you have access and opportunity to join in the national celebrations, and so to go down to the National Mall during a Memorial Day celebration, and you've got the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps bands that will perform, and of course, Arlington Cemetery, which every citizen should go and visit at some point in their lifetime, to kind of capture and understand the somber sacrifices that are made, but also the memorials, the Korean War Memorial, the World War II Memorial, and of course the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. But even, with that as a backdrop, the local community I was in, Memorial Day was the big event of the community for the year. So there would be a fun run in the morning, and there'd be a parade in the afternoon, much like you're going to have here in Watertown. And in between, there would be a ceremony, and the local veterans organizations would organize the ceremony, pay respects, have the POW MIA acknowledgement, and so it was really it was a way to bring the community together. Hopefully, remembering that it was not a celebration of the beginning of summer, but actually a day meant to memorialize and remember the sacrifices that our servicemen have made. But it was always a great event, and particularly for my family, trying to make sure that we would go to the ceremony as well as partake of the other festivities.
Absolutely. And it's always good to learn from other cities and towns. I love stealing ideas from other cities and towns, and if I have an opportunity to steal from another state because of folks who lived in other states, I'm always happy to be a sponge and learn from that. Yeah, I can certainly say, and as Watertown has our events, we start basically this week. We're replacing all the wreaths and all the memorial squares that we have across the city. On Wednesday, we're replacing cemetery flags. Friday, we have our school assemblies as well as a Freedom Garden event, which is at the Commander's Mansion, which is the old commanding officer's quarters when Arsenal Yards was a
Mhm.
military base. Sunday, we do a rolling procession. We start at 7:30 in the morning, and thankfully, because of Watertown police are there, no one is worried when we do our fire salutes at the different cemeteries throughout that morning. And then, of course, Sunday, as you mentioned, is our parade. We kick off right at 12. We're going to end at Victory Field. Our parade has never once been the same in these last couple of years. Coming out of the pandemic with the road work, unfortunately, on Mount Auburn Street, we've had to be flexible, and thankfully, the veterans organizations have also been flexible and supportive. The VFW this year is going to be joined by their trolley. The VFW sponsored a trolley, which currently regularly operates at the VA in Bedford for the geriatric wing over there, but they are able to sort of spring it loose for the Memorial Day parade, which is always great. Um, and sir, thanks again for joining us today. I just wanted to ask, sort of, we understand as service members and veterans that Memorial Day has a specific day. It's not specifically about cookouts or the beginning of summer and everything else, but Memorial Day and the veterans that we honor on a regular basis is not something that we do on just one day. And can you speak a little bit more about what you do beyond the Memorial Day festivities, beyond your regular day? What else you are involved in to support veterans?
So, as I moved into kind of full retirement, I was, looking for something as a way to give back. When I was down in Virginia, I figured it was going to be museum docent, Marine Corps Museum, Navy Museum, or Civil War battlefield guide, which I've done before, and helping to bring history alive is something I really enjoy. So when I got up, when we decided to move here, it was kind of all right, what's available? And the Revolutionary War is, of course, important and interesting, but as a military event, it doesn't have, there's not a lot of depth to it, I
Hmm.
think, although historians might disagree with me about that. So, what I found was there is a museum ship in Quincy, and it's the USS Salem, and the organization is the United States Naval Shipbuilding Museum. So I'm a volunteer down there. Um, it is a it's basically a post World War II, but it was designed and built for World War II heavy cruiser. It's the only heavy cruiser that's preserved as a museum ship, and it is a wonderful um, it's a wonderful representation of both American industry as well as American service, naval and marine, because there's a marine detachment on board the ship. Um, and it's very well preserved. It has a lot of accesses that other museum ships don't have. And there are a number of galleries that beyond the ship itself explain naval service and life aboard the life aboard ship, as well as the history of kind of naval U.S. naval history, at least from the 1900s on. So I found that to be very rewarding. Both helping to preserve the ship as well as to give tours and help to educate people, particularly young people. Last year during a scout jamboree, I think we had probably 300 scouts that came through the ship in a couple of days, and for them, it was a totally open book experience for them to get to see this big piece of military machinery, but then to convey to them some of the importance of the history, and what it meant to serve on a ship like that, both in wartime and peacetime.
Great. And do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with us?
No, I'm just grateful. I'm very flattered by the opportunity to, to act as kind of a representative, and I'm going to convey some thoughts. I just got back from a trip to Vietnam, and interestingly, as we left for the trip, we were beginning the celebrations of the 250th anniversary of our revolution.
Yep.
We were actually in Vietnam on the 50th anniversary of kind of the fall of Saigon from our perspective, but
Mhm.
from their perspective, the unification of their country.
Yep.
And while I know the Vietnam War is a very sensitive point for for especially for a lot of the veterans who served over there, as we went around and saw the places and some of the perspective from the other side, and the same kinds of memorials with rows and rows of a military cemetery and tablets memorializing the people who gave their lives in the conflict. It just brought to mind the sacrifices that are made in wartime, and the need to be very judicious about how we go about when we decide and if we decide to take that fatal step to join a conflict, to make sure that we're really doing things for the right reason.
Thank you so much again for joining us today. And this is a reminder to the residents and the folks watching. Our Memorial Day parade starts at 12 noon, starting at City Hall, concluding at Victory Field. That is on Monday, May 26th, and it will be broadcast live by our friends, Watertown Cable Access Television. Sir, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us on Monday.
Thank you.